Warning: this post contains spoilers for American Horror Stories Season 2, Episode 7. The twisted ending of American Horror Stories Season 2, Episode 7, Necro, leaves off on a cliffhanger hinting at two major deaths. American Horror Stories Necro cast and characters bring back two American Horror Story actors, Cameron Cowperthwaite and Spencer Neville, who are entangled in an increasingly morbid love triangle. While Necro doesn't have the same bizarre twist ending of American Horror Stories Facelift, it still concludes in the same disturbing manner as most of the Season 2 episodes. Necro follows young mortician Sam, Madison Iceman, as she defends how much she loves her job, implying that she finds the dead far more interesting than the living. American Horror Stories Season 2, Episode 7 then sees Sam find another who shares her peculiar obsession with death when the new gravedigger Charlie, Cowperthwaite, arrives. However, Sam's world is turned upside when Charlie's dead body ends up on her table, with her pre-embalming process taking a turn when she has intercourse with the corpse. Charlie appears soon after to tell Sam he was faking his death in order to bring her back to life, but the shame of what she's done and suppressing her true interests continue to haunt her as she attempts a normal life with her fiancé. With Sam and Charlie seemingly taking their own lives at the end of American Horror Stories Season 2, Episode 7, the characters take their dangerous obsession with death to the highest level. In the end, it's when Sam confronts the true reason for her morbid fascinations, witnessing her mother's death and living with her body for 3 days as a child, that she gives in to Charlie's pleas for them to live a twisted life together. But, with Sam shooting Charlie before letting dirt dump on top of them in a grave, American Horror Stories Necro ending doesn't make it clear whether being together forever means in life or death. Here is a full explanation for American Horror Stories Necro Season 2, Episode 7 cliffhanger ending and deaths. What happens in American Horror Stories Season 2 Episode 7's ending? American Horror Stories Season 2, Episode 7's ending sees Charlie ruin Sam's wedding by playing the video of her having sex with his corpse, causing Jesse to leave her, her friends to abandon her, and no jobs to hire her. Sam finally confronts Oz, cult actor Cameron Cowperthwaite's character at the graveyard with a gun, explaining that he ruined her life. Charlie counters and says he simply wanted to liberate her and prove that she liked the fact that she thought he was dead because it reminded her of when she was a child and drained the milk of her dead mother. Sam finally gives in and kisses Charlie, but the American Horror Stories Season 2 character surprisingly shoots him in the stomach, which makes him fall into the grave he was digging. But Sam jumps on top of him in the ditch and the two continue kissing, all the while Sam has pressed a button that makes the dirt begin to fill back on top of them. As American Horror Stories Season 2, Episode 7 ends, the camera pans away while the kissing Sam and Charlie are being buried alive. Necro twist ending explained. Did Sam and Charlie die by suicide? American Horror Stories Necro leaves off on a cliffhanger that doesn't confirm whether Sam and Charlie are actually intending to die by suicide. They had already escaped death as children, but just before falling into the grave, Sam pointed a gun at her head, while Charlie said he would die 1,000,000 times to be with her forever. They repeat that they'll now be together forever as the grave fills on top of them. This could mean that they'll be together forever in the afterlife, or they'll continue to risk death for the rest of their lives. While they are in a grave being filled with dirt, it's possible that they could escape at the last second, perhaps not Charlie, who is suffering from a gunshot wound, but Sam could manage to get out. Both of the American Horror Stories Season 2 characters mentioned how alive they felt during their brushes with death as a child, so having to escape the situation of being buried alive may just be a way for them to recreate this grisly exhilaration. However, it seems that both are intending to die at this moment, as they have already accepted that they can't go back to a normal life and are stimulated by the knowledge that death is coming for them while they kiss in the filling grave. Why Sam quit her job in Necro following the night that she had sex with Charlie's body in the morgue and he confronted her about her interests. Sam quits her job as a mortician. The Ryan Murphy TV show character's obsession with death has gone too far, and becoming a necrophiliac with Charlie's dead body revived in her what she had been suppressing for the past 24 years after her mother's death. To try to prove to herself that she could live a normal life, Sam quit her job, straightened her hair, got engaged to Jessie, and began using her talents as a makeup artist in a L'Oreal store. If she could leave her job at the morgue behind, Sam wouldn't be confronted with her disturbing true feelings. Necro's confusing twist explained. Was Charlie ever actually dead? The first big twist in American Horror Stories Season 2, Episode 7 is when Charlie shows up to speak with Sam, revealing that he wasn't dead that night. The "I know what you did last summer" actress character says that he had his chest cut open, he wasn't breathing, and truly did look like the dead bodies she had seen daily at work, but Charlie suggests that his friend gave him a pill and another was good with prosthetics. Considering how dead Charlie did look, American Horror Stories Necro seemed to be teasing that the ending would reveal he was actually a ghost. This never happened, but Sam seeing him 2 months later in a reflection before he disappeared continued to hint that she was the only one who could see him. However, since American Horror Stories Season 2, Episode 7 ended with him shot in the stomach and blood spreading, it does seem to confirm that he was alive the entire time. Of course, the American Horror Story spin-off character isn't apt to survive, being buried alive in the grave he dug. What happened to Sam's mom in American Horror Stories flashback? American Horror Stories Necro begins with a flashback to 1998, showing a young girl who happens upon her dead mother's body before drinking the milk from her breast. The connection between this flashback and American Horror Stories Season 2, Episode 7's main plot isn't revealed until Sam's memory is triggered by a box of cereal being spilled on the ground of her kitchen by her boyfriend, who used the cereal to spell out "Will you marry me?" The flashback confirms that a thief broke into their house when she was a child and beat her mom to death while Sam hid, and when she finally came out of hiding, she simply thought her mom was sleeping. Teasing why Sam became a mortician in the 2022 horror project, she spent time brushing her hair and feeding her cereal, having conversations with the body that was still bloody after 3 days. Sam says this was the last time she ever felt safe, indicating this is why he speaks so freely with the dead bodies in the morgue during American Horror Stories Season 2. Why Sam shot Charlie in the grave. Taking matters into her own hands, Sam shoots Charlie after he says that he would die 1,000,000 times to be with her. Also proving that she truly does want the feeling of being with a corpse again, Sam seems to be even more into him once the gunshot wound spreads, as it seems to indicate that he's on his way to dying. The disturbing nature of American Horror Stories Season 2, Episode 7, Necro, ending allows both characters to feel alive through death and confirms that Sam was more attracted to Charlie when she thought he was dead in the morgue. When Charlie said he would die for her 1,000,000 times, he meant that he would repeat what he did to her in the morgue that awoke the hidden unnatural temptations inside her. By shooting him in the grave, he would return to that same body she was attracted to on the slab and couldn't escape her as they both let the imminence of death pile on top of them. New episodes of American Horror Stories released Thursdays on